Welcome to another thrilling episode of How Did I End Up Here? Starring yours truly, Professor Jake Morrison, though my students insist on calling me Tank. Not because I'm built like one, mind you, but apparently because I have the survival instincts of military-grade equipment and the subtlety of a battering ram. Their words, not mine. Here I am, standing in classroom 47B of the Galactic Academy's Applied Survival Sciences Wing, staring at three of the most anxiety-ridden alien cadets this side of the Andromeda Spiral. You might wonder how a guy from Detroit ended up teaching xenobiology survival courses to creatures that look like they were designed by a committee of very creative, very drunk artists. Well, that's what happens when you're the only human stupid enough to volunteer for hazard pay assignment in sectors with atmospheric compositions potentially incompatible with human physiology. Turns out, when you're the only species that considers ghost peppers a casual snack and views radiation as a little spicy, the Academy figures you're qualified to teach everyone else how not to die from things that shouldn't kill them. Who knew that my childhood habit of eating dirt would eventually become a professional qualification? Today's lesson plan sits on my desk like a dare from the universe. Advanced Toxin Recognition and Survival Protocols. Now, before you think this sounds all serious and academic, let me paint you the real picture. This course exists because alien species keep accidentally poisoning themselves with things like mint toothpaste and orange juice. Last semester I had to file an incident report because a Centaurian cadet went into anaphylactic shock from inhaling near a cinnamon roll. The classroom itself is a testament to paranoia. Every surface is equipped with emergency decontamination systems, the air filtration could handle a chemical weapons attack, and there's a medical bay adjacent to the room that's better equipped than most planetary hospitals. The Academy learned the hard way that when you put different species together for survival training, you need to be prepared for literally anything to go wrong. My three current students are huddled in their designated safety zones, each equipped with personal atmospheric suits that make them look like they're about to explore a toxic waste dump, which, considering they were in a room with me, might not be entirely inaccurate. The irony isn't lost on me that I'm supposed to be teaching them survival skills when they need hazmat equipment just to be in the same room as their instructor. But hey, the Academy pays well and the health insurance covers exposure to confused aliens. So, who am I to complain? I glance at the lesson plan again and can't help but grin. Today we're covering practical toxin identification, which basically means I get to watch my students panic while I demonstrate why humans are apparently the universe's accidental answer to, what if we made something that could survive literally anywhere? The best part? They think they're being sneaky. Oh, these three have been planning something for weeks. I can tell because they keep whispering in their native languages and shooting me looks like they're planning either a surprise party or a very polite assassination attempt. Given that this is a survival course, I'm leaning toward the latter. But here's the thing about teaching survival to aliens. They consistently underestimate exactly how hard humans are to kill. It's almost adorable, really, like watching kittens plan to take down a lion if kittens had access to interstellar databases and advanced chemistry sets. I pick up my coffee mug, which is actually filled with water because caffeine makes some of my students break out in hives, and prepare to start the day's lesson. Little do I know that my eager students have prepared their own special curriculum edition. Time to find out just how much these cadets have learned about creative problem solving. Let me introduce you to my current batch of would-be survivors, each one a masterpiece of evolutionary anxiety wrapped in protective gear that costs more than my yearly salary. First up we have Zephyr, an Avirion from the Kepler-42 system. Picture a 7-foot-tall peacock that learned to walk upright, developed opposable thumbs, and immediately used them to build the galaxy's most sophisticated worry monitoring equipment. Zephyr's feathers shift colors based on stress levels, which means they've been cycling through the entire visible spectrum since the semester started. Right now, they're a lovely shade of, oh no, we're all going to die purple. Zephyr's biggest fear? That their hollow bones make them too fragile for any real survival situation. I keep trying to explain that being able to fly is actually a pretty decent survival advantage, but they're convinced that any planet with gravity stronger than a gentle suggestion will turn them into very colorful pancakes. Next to Zephyr we have Granite, a geological from the Tau Ceti mining colonies. Now, granite is exactly what you'd expect from a species that evolved from living rocks. They're about as wide as they are tall, which is saying something since they're roughly cube-shaped, and their skin has the texture and color of weathered limestone. Granite takes everything absolutely literally, which makes teaching metaphorical survival concepts a special kind of educational nightmare. Last week, when I mentioned that knowledge is power, Granite spent 3 hours trying to figure out how to convert information into electrical energy. When I said, think outside the box, they asked me to specify the dimensions and material composition of said box. Today, they're sitting perfectly still, which for Granite could mean either deep concentration or they've entered geological hibernation. With rock people, it's honestly hard to tell. Finally, there's Flux, a metamorph from somewhere in the Vegas system that they refuse to talk about. Flux can theoretically shift into any form they want, but they suffer from what their species calls confidence dysphoria. Basically, they're so worried about not looking right that they keep half-shifting and getting stuck in bizarre intermediate forms. Right now they appear to be attempting to look human, but they've got my proportions all wrong. Too many fingers, eyes slightly different sizes, and their hair keeps changing texture every few seconds. These three have been my project for the last 6 weeks, and I've got to admit, they're growing on me, like a particularly persistent fungal infection that you eventually learn to appreciate. They're earnest, hardworking, and absolutely convinced that their human instructor is some kind of unstoppable death machine masquerading as a friendly educator. Which brings us to their latest scheme. See, my students have this adorable habit of trying to test me. It started innocent enough. Week 1, Zephyr accidentally knocked over a plant that was apparently toxic to most carbon-based life forms. I helped them clean it up, got some of the sap on my hands, and when I didn't immediately collapse, they spent the rest of the class staring at me like I just performed a magic trick. Week 2, Granite brought me a traditional greeting gift from their homeworld. Turns out it was a mineral sample that most species can't handle without protective equipment due to its low-level radioactivity. I used it as a paperweight and complimented its aesthetic properties. Granite's been recalibrating their understanding of human durability ever since. Week 3, Flux tried to impress me by shape-shifting into what they thought was an intimidating Earth predator. They'd done their research and turned into what can only be described as a house cat with anger management issues. I spent 10 minutes giving them belly rubs while they purred in confusion. But today, oh today, they've really outdone themselves. They think they're being subtle, but I've been watching them pass notes in what they assume are untranslatable scripts. Newsflash: the Academy requires instructors to have basic literacy in all student languages. It's right there in the employment contract, buried between mandatory hazard insurance and next of kin notification procedures. From what I can gather, they've somehow acquired a vial of something called Regelian death drops. The name alone should tell you everything you need to know about alien approach to chemical nomenclature. They've been planning to slip it into my water bottle while I'm setting up the day's demonstration equipment. Their logic, as best I can follow it, goes something like this. If they can prove that even Professor Tank has limits, maybe they'll stop feeling so inadequate about their own survival capabilities. It's actually kind of sweet, in a attempted poisoning as therapy sort of way. The best part? They're absolutely convinced this is going to work. Zephyr's feathers have shifted to what I can only describe as determined orange. Granite has been sitting in the same position for 20 minutes, which for them indicates serious strategic thinking, and Flux has managed to hold a consistent humanoid form for almost an entire minute, which is a personal record. I have to admit, I'm curious to see how this plays out. All right, class, I announce, clapping my hands together in a way that makes all three of them flinch simultaneously. Today we're diving into the fun stuff, practical toxin identification using all available senses. I start pulling equipment from the storage cabinet, making sure to turn my back to them for extended periods. It's like watching a nature documentary about predators, except the predators are wearing safety equipment and whispering in panic-pitched voices. Now, the traditional approach to unknown substances, I continue, setting up various sealed containers on the demonstration table, involves extensive laboratory analysis, spectrographic readings, and consultation with xenobiology databases. This process typically takes anywhere from 6 to 48 hours, depending on the complexity of the compound. Behind me, I can hear the subtle sounds of amateur espionage. A soft clink as someone opens my water bottle, the barely audible whisper of liquid being added. Someone, probably Zephyr based on the nervous wing rustling, is acting as lookout. However, I say, still facing away from them, in actual survival situations you rarely have access to a full laboratory setup. Sometimes you need to make quick decisions based on limited information and field observation. The conspiracy behind me is reaching peak intensity. Granite's voice rumbles something that translates roughly to, "Is sufficient quantity confirmed?" While Flux responds with what sounds like, "Affirmative. Target water supply compromised." They've been watching too many military training videos. I turn around just as they are all trying to look innocent, which for this group means Zephyr's feathers have gone completely transparent, Granite has literally turned to stone, and Flux is vibrating slightly between 3 different attempted casual poses. "Excellent timing," I say, reaching for my water bottle. "Let me demonstrate proper field assessment techniques." The silence in the room becomes so complete, I can hear the air filtration system humming. 3 sets of alien eyes track my hand as I pick up the bottle. Zephyr's feathers have now cycled all the way through to what I can only describe as apocalyptic neon yellow. Granite's surface has developed stress fractures. Flux has accidentally sprouted what appear to be tentacles. "First step," I announce, holding the bottle up to the light. "Visual inspection. Are there any obvious changes in color, clarity, or consistency?" I make a show of examining the water, noting the slight shimmer that wasn't there before. "Interesting. There appears to be a minor refractive index variation. Could indicate dissolved solutes." All 3 students have stopped breathing. Well, Granite doesn't technically breathe, but they've stopped their usual geological creaking sounds, which is basically the same thing. Next, olfactory assessment. I unscrew the cap and take a deliberate sniff. Definitely chemical. Organic compound, probably alkaloid-based. Slight floral undertone suggests plant origin, possibly from a high-gravity world, based on the molecular density. Zephyr makes a sound like a deflating balloon. Flux has started unconsciously shape-shifting into what might be a prayer position, if their species had religion. And finally, I say, making direct eye contact with each of them in turn, the field expedient taste test. I raise the bottle toward my lips, and I swear the room's gravity increases by about 30% as all 3 aliens lean forward in horror. "Professor Morrison, no!" Zephyr shrieks, their voice hitting frequencies that probably just confused every bat within a 50-mile radius. But it's too late. I take a solid swig of their carefully prepared poison cocktail. The taste hits immediately, sharp, bitter, with an underlying heat that builds gradually. There's a metallic aftertaste that suggests complex alkaloids, and the burn has that particular quality that screams, "This was definitely supposed to incapacitate something." I swallow, pause for a moment as if considering the flavor profile, and then deliver my professional assessment. I say thoughtfully, "Tastes like Tuesday." The sound that emerges from my students is difficult to describe. Imagine 3 different species simultaneously having existential crises in 3 different octaves. Zephyr's feathers have gone completely white, which according to my xenobiology training indicates either transcendent enlightenment or complete system failure. Granite has developed what appear to be actual cracks running across their surface. Flux has given up on maintaining any consistent shape and is now just a puddle of confused biomass making distressed gurgling noises. Rigelian death drops. I continue conversationally, taking another sip because why not at this point? Interesting choice, quite potent for most carbon-based life forms. The alkaloid concentration would probably put a Centaurian in a coma for a week. 3 alien faces stare at me with the kind of expression usually reserved for watching natural disasters or particularly confusing magic tricks. "The question is," I say, setting the bottle down and leaning against the desk, "did you actually think this would work, or were you just curious about human toxin resistance thresholds?" That's when the real panic sets in. "Oh no, oh no, oh no," Zephyr is chanting, their feathers now cycling through colors that don't exist in any known spectrum. We have killed our instructor. We have committed instructor-side. This is how my academic career ends. Granite, meanwhile, has entered what appears to be a complete structural crisis. Chunks of their rocky exterior are literally crumbling onto the floor. Query: why does Professor Morrison continue to function? Expected result was immediate incapacitation, followed by emergency medical intervention. Clutch has managed to reform into something vaguely humanoid, but they keep sprouting extra limbs that seem to be reaching for the emergency medical kit. Should we call the medics? Should we call security? Should we call our parents? I don't want to explain to my Clutch siblings how I accidentally murdered a human. Relax, I tell them, taking another casual sip from the bottle. Nobody's dying today. Well, except maybe Granite, but that looks more like stress geological failure than actual mortality. I walk over to the whiteboard and start sketching out a basic molecular diagram. Let me explain what just happened here, because I think there's been a fundamental misunderstanding about human physiology. All three of them stare at me like I'm lecturing while actively on fire, which, considering their perspective, might not be far from the truth. Rigelian death drops, I begin, drawing out the chemical structure from memory, are indeed extremely potent. The primary active compound is a complex alkaloid that interferes with standard neural transmission patterns. For most species, exposure results in immediate paralysis, respiratory failure, and rapid onset unconsciousness. Zephyr makes a whimpering sound that translates roughly to, "Then why are you still talking?" The key phrase there, I continue, tapping the board with my marker, is most species. See, what you've accidentally discovered is that humans have been building up resistance to alkaloid compounds for literally thousands of years. I turn back to face them, noting that Flux has sprouted what appear to be stress tentacles. We call it capsaicin. You might know it better as the active compound in what we call hot peppers. Humans have been consuming increasingly concentrated doses of alkaloid-based compounds as recreational food additives since before we figured out agriculture. The silence stretches long enough for me to take another drink. Your lethal poison has roughly the same alkaloid concentration as what humans call a moderately spicy Tuesday lunch. I've had buffalo wings that pack more of a punch than this stuff. Granite's voice emerges from their crumbling form like an earthquake having an existential crisis. Query: are you suggesting that humans regularly consume lethal toxins for entertainment purposes? Oh, that's just the beginning, I laugh, settling back against the desk. See, the thing about humans is that we evolved on what the galactic community has classified as a Class 12 death world. Everything on Earth is basically trying to kill everything else, so we developed some interesting survival adaptations. I pull up the holographic display and start cycling through images of Earth flora and fauna. We share our planet with creatures that could bench press a hover car, plants that can dissolve metal, weather patterns that make nuclear explosions look like gentle spring rain. And we decided the best way to deal with all this was to eat most of it. Zephyr's feathers have now achieved a color that might best be described as panicked ultraviolet. But the Academy databases list humans as a peaceful, diplomatic species, primarily engaged in academic and cultural exchange. Oh, we are, I agreed cheerfully. The thing is, when your idea of a fun weekend involves activities that would hospitalize most galactic species, your baseline for dangerous gets a little skewed. We bring up a nutritional database on the display. Let me put this in perspective. The average human breakfast contains enough ethanol to intoxicate a Rigelian, sufficient caffeine to stop a Centaurian's heart, enough sodium to dehydrate most crystalline species, and sugar concentrations that would put a Keplerian into diabetic shock. All three students are staring at the display like it's showing them footage of their own funeral. And that's just breakfast, I continue. We haven't even talked about what humans consider recreational activities. Ever heard of something called extreme sports? Flux manages to form what might be a mouth and asks, "Do we want to know?" Probably not, I admit, but since we're having this educational moment, let me just mention that humans regularly engage in activities like jumping off cliffs with minimal safety equipment, riding barely controlled explosions at several hundred miles per hour, and voluntarily entering enclosed spaces with apex predators for entertainment. Granite's geological structure has now developed what appears to be tectonic plate movement. Statement. This explains much about human diplomatic approaches. How so? I ask, genuinely curious. Observation. When your species considers lethal toxins a mild seasoning, other forms of intimidation become significantly less effective. You know what? Grant makes a good point. You know what? I say, finishing off the last of their lethal poison. Since we're already doing impromptu demonstrations, let me show you my emergency survival kit. The look of pure terror that crosses all three faces is honestly kind of flattering. Zephyr's feathers have achieved a shade that I'm pretty sure violates several physics laws, while Flux has unconsciously shifted into what appears to be a defensive formation involving entirely too many spikes. I reach into my desk drawer and pull out a standard-issue human emergency kit. Now, Academy regulations require all instructors to carry species-appropriate emergency supplies. Most of your professors have things like atmospheric backup systems, radiation shielding, and medical nanobots. I open the kit and start laying out the contents on the demonstration table. Humans, however, have slightly different emergency preparedness needs. First item, a small metal flask. Emergency ethanol. Now before you panic, this isn't for drinking. Well, not usually. It's primarily a disinfectant fuel source and, in desperate situations, anesthetic. The concentration is about 40% alcohol by volume. All three students are leaning as far back as their safety equipment allows. Granite has actually retreated to the corner of the room. Of course, I add casually, unscrewing the cap. Field testing is important for quality control. I take a small sip, savoring their collective gasp of horror. Yep, that's the good stuff. Burns a little going down, which means it's fresh. Next item, a small container of white tablets. Emergency caffeine supplements. Standard dose for humans is about 200 milligrams. For comparison, that's roughly equivalent to what would put a Centaurian into cardiac arrest. I dry swallow 2 tablets while maintaining eye contact. These are particularly useful during extended survival situations, when you need to maintain alertness for days at a time. Zephyr makes a sound like a smoke detector having a nervous breakdown. Professor Morrison, please stop consuming emergency supplies that could kill us just by being in the same room. Oh, we're just getting started, I grin, pulling out the next item. Emergency protein bars. Now these are specially formulated for human nutritional needs during extreme stress situations. I unwrap one and take a bite. The taste is somewhere between cardboard and regret, but I've had worse. Primary ingredients include processed plant proteins, concentrated vitamins, and what Earth cuisine calls natural flavors. The sodium content alone would probably mummify most water-based lifeforms. Flux has given up entirely on maintaining humanoid shape and is now just a quivering mass of what I can only describe as existential dread given physical form. But the real interesting part, I continue, pulling out a small red bottle, is this emergency hot sauce. The silence that follows is so complete, I can hear my own heartbeat. Now this might look like a condiment to you, but for humans, this represents concentrated survival psychology. See, when everything is trying to kill you, adding voluntary pain to your food serves several important functions. It releases endorphins, clears sinuses, and maintains morale. I shake a liberal amount onto the protein bar and take another bite. This particular variety is made from what we call Carolina Reaper peppers. It measures about 2.2 million Scoville units. Granite's voice emerges from their corner hideout like the sound of mountains having regrets. Query, what does Scoville units measure? Oh, that's our scientific scale for measuring capsaicin concentration in food, I explain cheerfully. For reference, your Rigelian death drops would rate at about 50,000 Scoville units. So this hot sauce is roughly 44 times more potent than the poison you tried to kill me with. The sound that emerges from my students defies classification. It's part scream, part prayer, and part what I can only assume is the alien equivalent of questioning their life choices. The beautiful thing about human survival equipment, I continued, pulling out the final item, is that it's all multi-purpose. Take this, for example. I hold up what appears to be a small metal container with a screw-on lid. Emergency medical supplies. specifically acetylsalicylic acid tablets. Humans use these for pain relief, fever reduction, and cardiovascular health maintenance. I open the container and shake out 2 white tablets. Standard human dose is about 600 milligrams. For most galactic species, this concentration would cause immediate gastric hemorrhaging. I pop both tablets into my mouth and chew them. The bitter taste makes me wince slightly, but I've definitely had worse survival meals. And the really fun part, I add, swallowing the aspirin, is that everything I just consumed is considered mild by human standards. This is what we pack for minor emergencies. You should see what we bring for serious survival situations. Zephyr has now achieved a color that I'm pretty sure is classified as a weapon in several star systems. Please, Professor Morrison, we understand. Humans are terrifying. We get it. You can stop demonstrating now. Oh, but we haven't even talked about human recreational chemistry yet, I say, reaching for my coffee mug. Did you know that humans deliberately cultivate and consume fermented plant matter that produces psychoactive compounds? We call it beer, and it's considered a social beverage. That's when Flux faints. Well, as much as a shape-shifting blob can faint, they just sort of deflate, with a sound like someone letting the air out of the universe's hopes and dreams. I'm starting to think my teaching methods might need some adjustment. It's only when I notice that one of my students has literally liquefied from stress that I start to think, maybe I've been a bit too enthusiastic with today's demonstration. Okay, everyone, let's take a step back, I announce, setting down my emergency kit and actually looking at the current state of my classroom. Flux is a puddle of traumatized biomass on the floor, Zephyr appears to have molted from sheer panic, and Granite has retreated so far into their corner that they've actually started fusing with the wall. I think, I say gently, we might have gotten a little carried away with the practical demonstration portion of today's lesson. I walk over to Flux and crouch down beside their puddled form. Hey there, buddy. You still with us? A small pseudopod emerges from the mass and waves weakly at me. I'm going to take that as a yes. Zephyr, I call out. Your feathers are going to grow back, right? Because the Academy has very strict policies about permanent psychological damage to students. A muffled voice emerges from the pile of molted plumage. Query, are all humans like you, Professor Morrison, or are you some sort of specially enhanced military specimen? I can't help but laugh. Oh, Zephyr, I'm actually considered pretty average by human standards. If anything, I'm on the cautious side. You should meet my sister, Lisa. She teaches extreme environment survival to human special forces. Her idea of a light snack would probably sterilize this entire classroom. The sound that emerges from Granite's wall-fused position sounds like tectonic plates crying. Look, I say, settling into my desk chair and trying to project a more calming presence. I think there's been a fundamental misunderstanding here about the nature of this course. I gesture around the room, taking in the medical equipment, safety protocols, and general atmosphere of barely controlled panic. This isn't actually advanced toxin recognition and survival protocols. 3 sets of alien attention focus on me with laser-like intensity. This is remedial human interaction without accidentally declaring war, I explain. You 3 have been specially selected for this course because your respective species have a concerning track record of misunderstanding human behavior and interpreting it as either a challenge to combat or a threat to galactic stability. The silence stretches long enough for me to open my desk drawer and pull out their actual files. Zephyr, your people filed 17 separate diplomatic complaints last semester because a human exchange student kept aggressively offering food-sharing rituals. He was trying to invite you guys to pizza parties. Zephyr's voice emerges weakly from their feather pile. Pizza parties are social warfare designed to establish dominance hierarchies through competitive consumption of dangerous substances. Pizza is bread with cheese and tomatoes on it, I reply patiently. The most dangerous thing about pizza is that it's really hard to stop eating once you start. I turn to Granite's wall fusion situation. And Granite, your species has been filing formal incident reports every time a human uses what you call incomprehensible threat gestures. You've been interpreting human laughter as a war cry. Granite's voice rumbles from somewhere inside the wall structure. Clarification. Human laughter involves baring of teeth and violent expulsion of respiratory gases. This indicates preparation for combat. Human laughter means we think something is funny, I explain. We bare our teeth because we're happy, and the respiratory thing is just how our vocal cords work. It's literally the opposite of aggression. Finally, I look down at Flux slowly reforming puddle state. And Flux, your diplomatic corps has been interpreting human adaptability as evidence of a hive mind invasion force. Every time a human learns a new skill or adapts to a different environment, your people assume we're revealing another aspect of our true alien nature. A small mouth forms in the biomass. But humans demonstrate capabilities that exceed all logical parameters for individual organisms. This suggests distributed intelligence network with specialized drone units. Nope, I say cheerfully. We're just really curious and too stubborn to admit when something is impossible. It's not a hive mind. It's more like weaponized optimism combined with poor risk assessment skills. I stand up and walk to the whiteboard, erasing my earlier chemical diagrams and starting fresh. So, here's your real lesson for today. Humans aren't trying to intimidate you. We're not demonstrating superior combat capabilities. We're not establishing dominance hierarchies or preparing for interstellar conquest. I write in large, clear letters. Humans are accidentally terrifying. We evolved on a planet that was actively trying to kill us every single day, so we developed survival traits that seem absolutely insane to everyone else in the galaxy. We don't consume toxins to show dominance. We do it because thousands of years ago, someone thought, hey, this plant that makes my mouth hurt also makes my food taste better. And we just never stop. Slowly, very slowly, my students begin to return to their normal forms. Zephyr's feathers start growing back in less panicked colors. Granite begins the process of separating from the wall with sounds like a geological divorce. Flux manages to maintain a roughly humanoid shape for more than 30 seconds. So, I conclude, capping my marker, your assignment for next week is simple. I want each of you to identify one human behavior that your species has classified as potentially threatening, and we're going to walk through the actual, boring, non-military explanation for why we do it. I grin at their gradually recovering forms. And I promise, no more impromptu demonstrations involving emergency survival supplies. We'll stick to theoretical discussions and maybe some nice, safe, holographic simulations. The relief in the room is almost tangible. Oh, and one more thing, I add, picking up my water bottle and finishing off the last of their lethal poison. Next time you want to test your professor's limits, maybe just ask first. I'm always happy to explain why humans are weird. It's literally my job. As I watch my students slowly return to functional states, I can't help but think that maybe, just maybe, we're making real progress toward interspecies understanding. Either that, or I'm going to need to invest in some stronger emergency supplies.